Mark, it's Mags. Listen, I wanted to just check with you about when we were going to be recording the show next. I think I might have a conflict for Tuesday night. You watched the movie again, didn't you?
Hello, I'm Mark Kinney, and welcome to Those Crazy Games. Please forgive my condition, but I promised controversy at the end of the Legacy War of Ages review, and you're going to get it here in our first media-related episode. This will also introduce an episode format that I hope to return to from time to time. So, the year 2000 brought us, among other things, the long-awaited Courtney Solomon-directed Dungeons & Dragons movie. Reaction was split early on, with a trend towards reviling as time passed by. Myself, I had all kinds of fun watching it in the theater, and I still have a soft spot for it in my heart, even after seeing more of its flaws on a truly critical rewatching for this video project. You see, this movie is one of the reasons why this show even exists. In the early days of podcasting, I was going to do a series of commentary track podcasts, shows you could listen to alongside the movie, just like a DVD commentary, discussing the movie being watched. The Dungeons & Dragons commentary was the only one that former AGC host Chris Heim and I released under the Dice Camera Action name, years and years ago. Now, and this show's name was originally going to be Dice Camera Action, but it found out it was already taken. Now, to be sure, there are plenty of things wrong with Dungeons & Dragons. But there are a number of things I think they got right as well. I'm going to go through a few of these in a series I'm calling Too Hot, Too Cold, Just Right. So, let's dig in. The Good ZMER. I'll admit I'm probably one of the only people on the internet who thinks that creating a whole new setting for the Dungeons & Dragons movie rather than using one of the existing ones was a good idea. Just about every other possible world had its partisans, especially Greyhawk and the Forgotten Realms, with a good showing from the Dragonlance folks as well, and they would eventually get their own movie, which we'll get to, don't you worry about that. Anyway, while pretty much everyone shook their head at the introduction of ZMER as the movie's setting, it did carry a few advantages. The new setting allowed the makers to avoid the nerd rage from getting someone's favorite setting wrong, and let them set some of their own rules. You know, things like magic. Except for that magical dust they threw around to do things. Nothing like that has ever been part of any Dungeons & Dragons anything and should not exist.
Abra, come here! Magic burgers up here!
Yeah. Anyway, if the movie had been successful, it's possible we could also have had a whole series of world supplements for ZMER as part of the Dungeons & Dragons line. Wizards of the Coast had already printed character stats from the main cast of the movie in an issue of Dragon magazine, so at least some thought had gone into it. That kind of synergy could have been pretty nice, but alas, things did not go quite so kindly. There was one hitch to the whole magic thing, though, that had nothing to do with magic dust. The bad, the X of Dragon Control. For all the fun we had with magic in the movie, the magic items don't have a lot of variety. Profion is trying to create a wand that controls dragons. Empress Sabina's scepter controls dragons. The Rod of Savril controls dragons. The only magic items in this movie we see that don't control dragons are the map with the magic runes and the quicksand rug that Snails sinks into, and I wouldn't count on those not controlling dragons as their night job. The good, the cast. Those names I mentioned earlier remind me of the cast that they got for Dungeons & Dragons, and that they were actually pretty good. Yes, they hammed up for a lot of the movie, but they also had scenes of refreshing subtlety as well. Even Jeremy Irons, and we'll get back to him in a moment. Thora Birch took a theatrical turn as Empress Savina, as happens in fantasy movies like this. Justin Whalen and Marlon Wayans played likable characters in Ridley and Snails. Zoe McClellan could have been Zooey Deschanel before Zooey Deschanel had things gone better. Bruce Payne radiated menace as Damodar, and Kristen Wilson's Norda and Lee Arnberg's almost nameless dwarf Elwood. Elwood? The hell kind of name for a dwarf is Elwood? Does he have a brother named Jake? Anyway, their performances are two of the most even among the main cast. Now, a lot of people do complain about Marlon Wayans' Snails, saying that the character is largely a racial stereotype, but I'm not sure about that. Yes, the character is rooted in slapstick comedy, but that's an old comedic tradition that, while contributing to some of the racial stereotyping that you see, is not the entirety of it, and it has a huge existence outside of the stereotyping. Now, personally, I think a certain character in a certain huge movie from the prior year that was coming out on video months before Dungeons & Dragons released into theaters had more to do with people's perception of Wayne's performance here. Then again, they killed Snails off, only one of two characters of color, so hey, what do I know? Still, this was nothing next to the horror that was the bad Jeremy Irons. If I were to blame one person and only one person for the failure of the Dungeons & Dragons movie, it would be Jeremy Irons. Other than the one scene in the council chambers, Irons is a bigger ham than Porky Pig, screaming and cackling maniacally and being evil. Now, I don't know if his coming to this project with more seeming respect would have affected the other performances, but I can't help thinking that Empress Sabina's announcement at the end of the movie, freeing the lower classes of ZMER, had some sense of giving up to it, compared to the theatrical quality of her other performances in this film. Now, since that was also probably ADR, I can't help thinking that the final product depressed her that much. Yay, you're free! Who cares? And this, of course, is thrown in starker relief by the quality of the cameos. The good. The cameos. There are a few cameo appearances in the background of shots, mostly D&D creator Dave Arneson is in one of the battle scenes, but we have two real standouts playing supporting roles. First, Richard O'Brien, Riff Raff himself, playing true to form as a guildmaster of thieves whom the group approaches or gets caught by or something to obtain an important item. Now, O'Brien was also the host of a game show called The Crystal Maze, so there's that tie-in to the contest scene in this dungeon that resembles the tricks of that particular show. And he adopts a flashy, arrogant character perfectly fitting for the role as well. And then, in a single scene that you might miss if you went out for popcorn and drinks at the wrong time, Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor himself, in a calm, quiet role as King of the Elves. On the other hand, we have the opposition. The bad. The monsters. The actual hell is that thing? And the Beholders. In D&D, the Beholder is one of the iconic monsters, so much so that they were never released in the Open Game License System Reference document. If you're not familiar with it, think like the big flying one-eyed monster from Doom, but with lots of smaller eyes on stalks, shooting beams that neutralize magic, neutralize free will, neutralize characters' lives, basically. Here we have jumbo versions of the thing that showed up in Big Trouble in Little China. even the dragons could look better. I mean, CGI was just coming of its own at that point, and this didn't have anything like the budget of a Jurassic Park. The best monster, such as it is, really, is the skeleton or lich or whatever that thing was that had the Rod of Sevril in that cave. But that isn't entirely what we came to this for. The good. The story. Now, for all the distractions of hammy acting and bad effects, the basic story is a decent one. A forward-thinking ruler of a society of mages, something that I don't think I've seen much in fantasy stories, or at least in fantasy movies, wants to bring equality to the non-magical subjects of ZMER, but runs into resistance from the conservative faction of mages led by Profion. The pacing of the movie works fairly well, and it makes a nice roller coaster ride if you can get past the other factors that bring it down. I mostly blame Jeremy Irons earlier in the episode, but Courtney Solomon's relative inexperience as director and producer, this being his first movie, probably contributed to the lesser quality of the rest of the film, at least as much. And the deleted scenes on the DVD give us the smoking gun where this is concerned. The bad. The missing scene. Let's go back to the tavern after Marina, Ridley, and Snails get away with the map. Ridley discovers how the runes work, and he and Marina go inside the map. For the next several minutes, we have Norda and Damodar arrive, and general chaos as the group tries to get away. And the next time we see Marina and Ridley, it's when they emerge from the map, arguing about what they're supposed to do. And for at least the next little while, they know more about the plot than we do. In the deleted scenes on the DVD, we discover a scene inside the map, where Ridley and Marina are told of the Rod of Sevril, a scene that was never finished because there was no budget for the special effects. I don't just blame Solomon for this. Well, okay, if he did the casting, it takes on a little more blame. But I'm looking at you, Mr. Irons. Jeremy Irons is probably the biggest name attached to this movie. And for the performance they got from him, they could have done much better with their money. For that performance, they could have gotten Billy Zane or Eric Roberts and probably paid them a lot less. In a lot of ways, I pity this movie. It's clearly a labor of love on Solomon's part. The characters are memorable, and ZMER as a setting had a lot of potential. As in against the grain as this opinion goes, for all the sins it commits, I still kind of like it. And it made this show possible. But just wait. Not long ago, Hasbro, Sweet Pea, and Warner Brothers announced a whole new Dungeons & Dragons movie. I think that just goes to show I will have no shortage of material for years to come. This has been Those Crazy Games. Watch for a vlog next week on things I have no intention to review here. And in 2, we continue our excursion into gaming media. I'm Mark Kinney, and keep rolling crits.